Hey there, it's Owen from Happy, and this week we'll be talking about equalization, specifically the Manley Massive Passive. EQ may seem like a straightforward world, tweak some frequencies and move along, but not all EQ units are the same, and the Massive Passive itself is a particularly special one. I mean, there's a couple of digital emulations of this box that can still be bought new, so it's either kind of pricey, there's something cool going on inside, or maybe both. Today I'm going to compare and shoot at an original Massive Passive, the pre-2019 version with a linear power supply, with the UAD version that's been around for about 12 years now, and the brand new Pulsar emulation that came out a couple of months back. The Massive Passive gets described a whole lot as a pool tech on steroids. I'm sure if you've gotten this far, you probably know what the famous 50s Pultec EQP1A looks like and sounds like. The Pultec famously has 5 knobs, 3 switches, and a huge price tag. Mono vintage units sell for at least $10,000 Australian a piece, and there's a world of both good and not so good remakes available on the market. On the other hand, the Massive Passive is right now a $9,000 stereo piece with 4 different interactive bands, each with a range of selectable EQs, a bandwidth adjuster, gain boost or cut, and the option to set each frequency area as a bell or shelf, plus high and low pass filters. Now, people say that a lot of the sound of these units comes from the subtle saturation and the huge transformers and the large amount of vowels. They certainly impart a touch of character, and I tend to use this one on mixes and masters as I've had a hard time getting it to sound bad. The bass boosts on this thing sound huge, and boosting way up top, even around 27K, sounds fantastic too. And cutting frequencies can easily go from subtle to fairly pointy. I think one of my favourite things about working with it, besides from the fact that it sounds so good, is that there's no visual representation of what you're doing. It's strictly an ears only piece. The other thing is that it's pretty hard to make these units sound bad. The curves are quite soft, even at their most extreme, so it's not the kind of piece I'm going to do any surgical EQing with. It's mostly about lovely broad strokes to enhance a master right here. So today, we're going to put this analog unit up against the 2 digital remakes and see if the EQ curves look different, if they sound different, and if anyone would notice or care if I subbed out a real-life box for a computer version. Often when I'm using the analog version, I'll use the unbalanced outputs that skip the output transformers, as it colours the sound a little less. And asking around, it seems like a pretty common way to work. So far as I can see, the UAD version doesn't allow this option, but the Pulsar version does. So let's keep the transformers engaged for this shootout to be inclusive for all the boxes. Now, first up I'm going to run the hardware unit over some drums just to show you what kind of huge curves you can get and how they actually sound across a drum kit. One of my favourite things about the analog unit is the touch. The tactility of turning knobs until the sound is subjectively good to my ears. The Pulsar unit has a built-in EQ visual graph which you can turn off, which I'm definitely going to do. I'll have the FabFilter EQ visual up so we can see the frequencies moving as I adjust, and we'll use the EQ Curve Analyzer tool from Bertum to get a good visual idea of what's happening afterward when you twist the knobs on this thing. And then we'll use our damn ears and try to use each unit identically to manipulate an entire mix and see if they actually sound alike or different. Alright, let's boost the bass at 100 Hz. Now let's cut at 270. Now I'm going to boost the presence at 3.3K. And one of my favorite things this does, I'm going to boost the air at 16K. Now let's hear it on and off. Alrighty, check it out. I probably would shy away from adjusting this extremely if I could actually see what I'd done, but that's part of the allure of outboard equipment. You can also see the bandwidth can be quite mellow when it's at its wider setting, but set it sharp and it'll go up or down 20 dB. You can also see that the left and right curves are ever so slightly off. Looks like I have to get this damn thing retuned pretty soon. I guess that doesn't happen with the software units. Now, let's pull out the UAD emulation and the Pulsar emulation, make fairly extreme settings across all three on a song, and see how they sound if there's any differences. You'll notice the Pulsar has a slightly different layout, which I'll do my best to match. There's no boost or cut switch, it's all knob based here. The Pulsar also has a drive control, auto gain, and a transformer selector, which I touched on earlier. The other cool thing the Pulsar does is let you choose frequencies between the actual frequencies printed on the box, whereas hardware and UAD versions snap specific frequencies. First up, the UAD Emulation. Here's the Pulsar Massive. And finally, the Manley Hardware Massive Passive. Let's take a quick look at the analyzer curves with the same settings on each unit. Here's the UAD, here's the Pulsar, and here's the Manley hardware. The Pulsar is a little harder to match as the switches aren't exactly the same as the other two units, but I think we've got pretty close. So there we have it, the Manley Massive Passive the UAD Software Massive Passive, and the Pulsar Massive. Overall, they definitely did some EQing, and each definitely has the 3D depth type effect that you expect from the Massive Passive units. Now, any choices I make are going to be fairly subjective, but between the three, I felt the UAD had a nice bass punch. I wasn't expecting that. That may also mean that I need to retube the hardware unit, as it was very close but didn't quite punch as hard down there. The highs on the hardware version, when they're pushed this hard, were definitely my favourite, although the two others weren't too far off. I felt like the Pulsar didn't quite have the sound down 100%, but it's still a fantastic unit with a whole lot of extra features that go beyond the original, so it's definitely worthwhile using. One thing is the ever-present UAD problem of not being able to increase the size of the plug-in window. Come on people, let's be able to do that in 2022. So is it worth grabbing the hardware over the software emulation? Look, I love the tactility of the hardware, the clicking of the switches and the speed at which it can be used to pull sounds. And the silkiness of the air EQ frequencies are fantastic. Plus it does sound like there's a touch more depth in the hardware version, which is kind of hard to explain and quantify, but I guess you can hear it. But if you're not using the hardware unit for work all the time, it might seem like a really ridiculous amount of money to drop when you've got plugins that'll get you about 80–85% of the way there. For mastering, I definitely stick with the hardware unit, but I'm going to do some further investigation into why this UAD unit had a touch more punch to the bass. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or information about these plugins and hardware unit, please put it in the comments.